You're watching Monday's Eye on Africa. I'm James Creedon. Here are our headlines this evening. In Nigeria, gunmen have kidnapped the prelate of the Methodist Church in the country. It's the latest in a spate of kidnappings of religious figures. We'll get more from our correspondent in Lagos. Israel is seeking closer and warmer relations with Africa. The Israeli embassy here in Paris is organising a large conference on Israel-Africa relations on Tuesday. We'll hear more in studio from a top Israeli diplomat on that topic. In Tunisia, tour operators are hoping for a revival of their business this summer after the pandemic, but internal tourism is a new focus. We'll bring you a report on that later on in the show. Thanks for watching. Now, it's an incident that once again mirrors the troubling security challenges in Nigeria. Samuel Kanu Uche, the head of Nigeria's Methodist Church, has been kidnapped along a highway in Omoneochi area. That's in Abia State in the southeast of the country. Two other senior clerics with him were also taken hostage. Now, in recent years, the southeast of Nigeria has grappled with violent attacks and abductions, often blamed on unknown gunmen. Authorities, though, accuse members of the indigenous people of Biafra. They're a separatist group, and many say that they might be behind some of these attacks. Here's more from our correspondent, Sam Olakoya.
His Eminence, Dr. Kanu Uche, who is head of the Methodist Church in Nigeria, is one of Nigeria's most prominent religious leaders. Dr. Uche was abducted together with a Methodist bishop and a chaplain while they were traveling in the southeastern state of Abia. Nigeria has seen a wave of abductions by armed groups in recent times. These abductions are either carried out for ransom or for political reasons. Gunmen are sometimes known to kill their captives. The armed groups behind the wave of kidnappings have targeted virtually all segments of the Nigerian society, including religious leaders. 10 Christian clerics have been abducted this year. 2 of them were killed. The Christian Association of Nigeria and many other Nigerians have expressed outrage at Dr. Uche's abduction. The abduction of the head of an international church like the Methodist will further expose the level of armed banditry in Nigeria to the outside world. No group has claimed responsibility for Dr. Uche's abduction. His abduction comes 3 weeks after a legislator and his aide were kidnapped and killed in southeast Nigeria. The spate of violence in southeast Nigeria is blamed on the separatist group Indigenous Peoples of Biafra, IPOB, but the group denies these allegations.
Sudanese authorities have freed several dozen political detainees. However, others remain jailed. This after the country's military ruler announced the lifting of a state of emergency. That state of emergency in place since last October's coup d'etat. The releases include 24 people connected to the anti-military protest movement in Port Sudan. 39 others were released in or near the capital Khartoum. Regular mass street protests calling for the military to quit politics have continued for more than 7 months since that coup, which ended a military-civilian power-sharing arrangement struck after the overthrow of Omar al-Bashir in 2019. Those protests continue, however. Further demonstrations took place in the city of Omdurman across the Nile from Khartoum on Monday. Israel is seeking closer and warmer relations with Africa. The Israeli embassy in Paris is organising a large conference on Israel-Africa relations on Tuesday. And indeed, we're joined now in studio by your name escapes me, the Deputy Director of Africa Relations at the Israeli Foreign Ministry, Sharon Bar-Li, right?
Indeed.
Thank you, it came back. So listen, tell us about this conference, first of all. You're in town especially for that. Why Paris? What's going to take place tomorrow?
Indeed. Thank you very much, James, for having me. And indeed, tomorrow, the Israeli embassy in Paris will be holding this conference about Israeli-African relations. And why in Paris? Because obviously France has a very special role when it comes to Africa, especially Francophone Africa. And we are aspiring to get a higher exposure in Francophone African countries, and we feel that here we will get a large and high quality audience of both media people, business people, academicians, and Afrophiles, right. I should say.
So there have been breakthroughs in recent years in relations between Israel and countries where there were very cold relations, if not no relations at all for a time. For example, Morocco. What about the problem of public opinion, though? There's still such a problem in the Israel-Palestinian conflict. How can that be? How can relations with a lot of African countries be successfully addressed until that core problem is addressed?
I'm really happy that you've asked this question, because we are in a unique point in time. You know, if you look at the changes in the Middle East, and in the backdrop of the Abrahamic Accords and the newly established diplomatic relations and the normalization process with some of the Gulf countries and some of the North African countries, we learn that two countries do not have to agree on the full scale of political issues in order to cooperate on issues of joint interest. And we've learned that looking at today's challenges, be it regional security, fighting terrorism, food security, climate change, or pandemics, you know, no country can face these by itself. We have to cooperate, we have to work together. And indeed, we see, and this is a great example, the Abrahamic Accords, that countries can hold respectful disagreements and yet work closely together. You've mentioned Morocco, rightfully, but one can talk also about Chad, with which we've renewed our relations just 3 years ago. And just 2 weeks ago, our ambassador has presented his credentials for the first time in 50 years, making history. I can tell you more than that. We see today that more and more Muslim governments are talking to the Israeli government than ever before. And we see that...
But just on that point, right, because there is progress, there are clear areas where relations have warmed up, but public opinion is probably as bad as it has been in a long time, in particular because the tensions are still there with the Palestinians. So you may have improvement in relations on a state level, on an economic level, but is that going to be tenable if on the street a lot of people in countries, for example, such as Morocco, really don't feel well disposed towards Israel in the current context?
I think that it's a process. And I think that one can see the changes also in public opinion. There is a lot of people-to-people activities, both with Moroccan society, with African societies, with societies in the Middle East. There are different opinions.
Okay, but let's talk about some of the win-win, because there are areas where cooperation. Right? You opened the embassy, we were talking about it earlier, in Ghana. We just had a special show, actually, France 24's Eye on Africa was in Ghana last week. And one of their concerns is food sustainability, being able to produce their own food at home, not relying on imports, exports. This is somewhere, from what I understand, that this is a topic that Israel perhaps might be able to help countries like Ghana on.
Absolutely.
Right?
And we are working in different places in the continent on the issue of food security, on the issue of how do you alleviate poverty and turn subsistence farming into commercial farming.
What examples?
I will give you an example, for example, on what we're doing in Rwanda. Since 2018, we've established horticulture excellence center in Rwanda, which actually combines the know-how and the do-how of Israeli farmers with Israeli innovation and technology, and by this attracting young people to work in the field of agriculture through technology, through innovation. And we're doing similar things in the east part of the continent. We're doing irrigation projects in Senegal.
Right, so desertification, it's a challenge faced in Israel as in many African countries.
Of course.
This is places, points of common accord, points of where cooperation is possible.
Absolutely. Many people don't know, but Israel is 60% a desert. We are an arid land, and we had to innovate on water technologies and water management in order to face water scarcity. And by the way, on this one, think about projects such as the Great Green Wall on the Sahel, on which Israel can work together with international organizations, with UN organizations, with the African Union, in order to assist and fight these climate changes.
What about Israel's desire to have observer status in the African Union? There are quite a few members who don't want that, right? How do you see that process going, in particular with the opposition of South Africa, for example?
Well, Israel has presented its credentials. Our ambassador in Addis Ababa has presented his credentials to the chairman of the commission, Moussa Faki, about a year ago in July 2021. So Israel has become an observer in the African Union. Obviously, there are still some countries that unfortunately are stuck in the past, in the stages of rejectionism, and they're still suffering from this residual post-Cold War ideologies. I think that this is something that will disappear with time, because by negating Israel, you know, they're actually negating the values of the African Union about peace and dialogue. And here there's an opportunity for the African Union to create new relevance for itself and to bring Israel in and to enjoy what Israel has to offer in different fields. We've mentioned health, we've mentioned agriculture, we've mentioned desertification and climate change, but there are also strategic issues of fighting terrorism, of regional stability. Let's not forget that Israel is the only country in the world that is sharing land border, terrestrial border with Africa, and Africa is Israel's backyard. And when there is instability in Africa, it influences Israel. When we see instability at the Red Sea, when we see piracy at sea, when we see jihadi and terrorist organization being active in the continent, maybe because it's more difficult for them to succeed in Europe.
We'll have to leave it there, unfortunately, time-wise. Best of luck with that in participating in that conference tomorrow at the Israeli Embassy. Thank you, Sharon Bar-Li. Now, in Tunisia, tour operators are hoping for a revival of their business this summer after the pandemic, but internal tourism is a new focus. When borders closed due to COVID, holidaying at home became a new focus with some interesting new developments. Lila Blaise and Hamdi Talili went to meet those Tunisians changing the face of local tourism.
In the Amazigh village of Zamour in Tunisia's south, an annual trekking festival has attracted hundreds of tourists since its launch 4 years ago. For Insaf, camping is a new adventure.
It's the first time I do this sort of thing, and I'm going to do the hiking and other sports activities.
Like other participants, she wanted a change from the traditional hotel holiday.
They didn't have this type of tourism before, but now there's more, and people have started to prefer these activities because they're more free and they're more relaxed.
This kind of alternative tourism is also promoting Tunisia's lesser-known regions and their heritage.
Tunisians are fed up with comfort and cliches. Many want to discover their country and go inland.
It's not just adventures into the south. In the northwest, the startup Tunisian Campers is organizing camping and hiking in the forests of Jendouba.
This isn't all of it. Follow me. There's plastic everywhere, unfortunately, so we have to clean.
For Mohammed, the startup's founder, this tourism is about respecting the environment.
For example, you see that everything is stored in baskets and not in plastic bags. Water comes from this tank. We also give flasks to our participants instead of plastic bottles.
During excursions, there are workshops on local knowledge, like here where everyone can learn to make soap and essential oils based on aromatic plants harvested by local women.
We, the so-called city women, are meeting rural women, and we had no idea these activities existed around here.
It's a more environmentally friendly tourism than the mass tourism model. Now these companies hope to convince foreign tourists to change their habits.
That brings us to the end of this edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching.